Hey everybody, so I want to discuss HubSpot's scoring model. At this point, you should have already heard about it if you're in that world at all, about the changes to the scoring model. We've already crossed the first bullet point, right? May 1st is gone, so you'll no longer be able to create new scoring properties. Coming up is July 1st, right? You'll no longer be able to edit existing scoring properties. And August 31st deadline is where they'll be stopped updating completely and will sunset, right? So the way I look at this is, I'll do it, I'll get to it, oh shit, I should have done it, right? And that's kind of we're approaching on I should have done it. July 1st is coming up, so I would not wait till this last day because it would become a headache. So HubSpot itself has some great articles out there as far as how you can cover this. You can read this in blogs. It looks like it's from the same user. She's done some pretty helpful guidelines of what it is and how it migrates. So I won't talk about that. What I will talk about is the lead scoring model itself once you're in there and the different models, right? We're going to compare today's stacked model versus a tiered model, right? So a stacked model is, if I'm looking at, let's take a look at example, trade shows and webinars, right? Register, attend, and engage for trade shows. Those are the most basic ones. We won't get to post trade shows or post webinar kind of scoring models, right? Things like, did I click on my email? Did I send a demo request, whatever it may be. We'll do that in another part. Right now, just keeping it simple for everybody to understand. So again, we've got the trade shows and webinars in a stacked model, right? You can see you've got property group. This is one property group here. And you'll see the score limit, 0 to 100. That's applying to this. And I'll get to why this is important and how it starts comparing the pros and cons in a stacked model versus tiered model. So stacked is exactly what it sounds like. You're adding points on top of each other, right? So in other words, if somebody registered for a trade show, that's +5. If they attended a trade show, that's +10. And if they engage at a visitor booth or whatever we want to label engage means for us, that's +20. So in total, there are 35 points possible for a person to get from a trade show, right? But it doesn't stop there. In this model, you're also saying if this webinar, if this person register for a webinar, it's known. If they viewed it live, it's known, and they engage in Q&A, that's another 35. So depending upon your threshold for life cycle stages, right? Whenever you want to notify, you want to get a notifications, or when you want to transition into sales, this can easily get up to 65, 70 points, right? Quite quickly, just by these alone. Now, one thing to consider is that webinar register is known, or trade show is registered, or whatever it may be, does not at this moment indicate which trade show in particular. It just says it's known. So in a model like this, I can say, hey, this person may have went to trade shows once or twice, or webinars registered once or twice. That number balloons quite significantly, right? You go from 65 to 100 just by two trade shows and 2 webinars, right? So it depends upon the volume, the scale, right? It's going to be business by business. This isn't a general rule of thumb. It's just something to consider when you're breaking it in this kind of particular model, right? So if you wanted to do a particular trade show or webinar, there's different ways to go about that. There's the object route, right? Creating a custom object, which is a little bit more complicated. Then there's obviously creating a property for each single webinar trade show, which also becomes a little bit more complicated as you have more webinars and more trade shows. So it depends. If you're doing 1 or twice per year, that might be worth it. But if you're doing quite a few a month per se, it can get kind of out of hand. And again, just kind of give a little bit more context. What I mean by that is, if I have a trade show and I want to particularly track just that trade show, this is not going to do that for me. It's just going to say it's known, right? So I might need to do a particular property, so I can type it in and say, oh, okay, that's going to give me a property for that webinar, and then I can put known. Like trade show XYZ, it's not engaged, is known. But I have to create 3 properties for each trade shows or webinar if I'm using this logic, right? And this is where you gotta kind of have to think about a 30,000 foot view overview and the macro to micro level. Same thing applies for webinar. Moving on to a same thing stack model, you're just separating these, right? You got the same thing going on. You just separate them a little bit more appropriately, but still you're ballooning trade shows. So instead of trade shows taking considerations for webinars, it's just going to do trade shows, which again, depending upon that's how you want to separate your data. if you want to funnel that way, this might be more appropriate than perhaps all of this. Because this quickly gets out of hand. This is separated per se at a property level, but it's still stacking them essentially, right? Then we get to the tiered model. Tiered is basically saying they registered for the show, they didn't attend, and they didn't engage. That's 5 points. See, I'm setting guardrails for what I want the max to be for that certain scenario. So trade show attended, but they didn't engage. That's 10 points for me. They engaged is known. That's 20. So all of these guardrail scenarios allow me to focus on the group score limit. And I'll come back to the other scenarios as well. See how it says 20? The reason why it says 20 is because the most that I want a person can get from this is 20. Even if this group score limit was not here, right? Even if this group score was not limit here, my filters and the way I've set it up would do its job. This is kind of like an extra security blanket, right, if you will. So you could work that in here. I could cap this as saying 20 or 15. But if all three of these are true, and I cap this at 20, I'm undervaluing what I need it to be, right? So if this is 35 altogether and I cap it at 20, okay, well then I'm capping at 20. If I do 35, then okay, I'm taking into consideration all of these. That's what this basically is saying. What's the max this person group can get? All the scenarios in place. But you'll notice you run out of pretty quickly. See where it says 45? You have 45 points remaining, whether you add it to this group or another group. So if I add webinars, which is also 35, I have 30 points left. Fast forward, when you reach 0, you have to create a new scoring model, right? You have to create a brand new scoring model. I'm not going to get into thresholds, which is what this is, score value, score thresholds. That's a longer video. I mean, I'll just give a quick recap. It's basically whenever you create one scoring model, it creates always a threshold plus the value with it. You can consider this to be the old HubSpot scoring, right? When you go to columns and you add HubScore, that's what this is. This is HubScore. You can call it what you want, but it will create a property for you. It will always create a property for you, right? And score threshold is exactly that, right? So it's their own definition. Again, how it's defined, you're kind of limited to what you can, go from 0 to 49. This, you can't edit this at all. This, the medium and high, you have a little bit of flexibility, right? Not the max, but the minimum, right? Because the max is 74. Anything above 74, it starts going to this category. So, just to recap, if you got this one, I've got to take into consideration all of these. I could say 65 is my cap, right? But then we talked about the scenarios where if I am a contact and I've done this twice or 1.5 times, 2 trade shows, 1 webinar, I'm already going to exceed 65, but I've been put on a cap. You see, the group score limit always dictates how many channels you can track. That's what you have to think about a little bit more strategically. Each one has a pro and con. You just have to figure out which one means the most for you, right? So hopefully this makes sense. Hopefully this gave you some value. And yeah, have a good day, everybody.